Hello YouTube, Tim here. I have a project that I'd like to do with you, and it is making a small Scythian style bow. Before I made a very large one that even when strung was approximately 48 inches tall. The draw weight was extremely low. It was a very, very comfortable bow. Very, very elegant and attractive. But now I'd like to do very much the same thing in a much shorter, smaller package. And it has been requested to do a build along. So the approximate shape will be something like this, shape and size. However, the tips should be even more heavily recurved. I will be making it out of 1/2-inch pipe. With any good luck here, I think we can expect the overall speed of the bow to be approximately 130 feet per second, if prior 1/2-inch bows of about this size are any indication. Since I want it to be a little bit on the light side, normally I make my 1/2-inch pipe bows 41 inches long, and I don't flatten them very much. Flattening 1/2-inch PVC, it's really not all that easy to get a very good flat taper on it. You can do it, but I prefer to leave it nearly round in the handle area. So I'll control the bending more by extending the bow. Let's say instead of 41 inches, let's make it 43 inches long. Or 44. How about 44? I think that's the exact same length that this bow is meant to be. So let's just mark there. And then we can perform the first cut. Flattening operations will be normal, but the handle will not be centered. We'll get to there in just a minute. 1/2-inch pipe is always fun to work with because it heats up very, very quickly. If anybody online watching this has any idea of what thermal decomposition products of PVC, rigid PVC are, I'd love to hear it. I know it should be chlorine as a product, but anything else I'd be very interested in hearing. I'm also given to understand that one of the thermal stabilizers in the US is a tin. I think a tin or a tin alloy. And I don't know how volatile that is. Okay. There we go. That leaves us with another short section. That would be good for a little child's bow. But for now, let's deal with this. Let's mark a handle section. First of all, find the middle of the bow. It's 44 inches long, so the true middle is 22 inches. The true center I like to mark on both sides so that when I rotate it I can reference that more easily. Now, what I'd like to do is, normally I go 2 to 3 inches on either side of the center. Here we want it to be an asymmetrical bow, so let's start and make the handle topped off at the center. That would mean, let's say, 4 inches down from there should be enough. So from 22 to 26 inches can be our handle. Maybe even I'll mark 27. That should be just about right. And then, just for reference, yeah. So this will end up being a little bit shorter than Ken's bow, but it will be a lot lighter, I can guarantee you that. We'll worry about the recurves and all of that later. For now, let's just heat the limbs and flatten it. Curly cues just to make sure it heats evenly. You can also do figure eights. Really, even this works. Let's see. Start here, 2/3, 1/3 to the end. 1/3, 2/3 beginning. that spreads heat fairly evenly too. And I like to vary it, just so I don't get too bored doing the same thing again and again and again and again. Otherwise you do tend to get distracted, and if you're too distracted, you forget what you're doing and you might let it burn. I've been very good lately about not letting it burn. I can't tell you even the last time that I've burnt a piece of PVC, so I don't want to start now. But burning is the easiest way to ruin your bow. So let's avoid that, shall we? The first notable feature of the Scythian bow is its cupid shape. What we're going to be doing is inducing a reflex at the handle, and then a deflex on either side of the handle, approximately 6 to 8 inches out from the handle. I'm going to have a gentle recurve to the overall limb, and then a sharp recurve in the terminal 4 to 6 inches. The knock style will be pin knocks, that's traditional. Look at that, it's almost done. This is the great part about using half-inch pipe. The outer area is still a little firm, but it's nearly done. Should just take another minute. I could turn the heat up a little bit too. I've been working on deflexing and reflexing earlier and doing recurves. So typically when I'm doing detail work, I turn the heat down just so I don't overheat the pipe, because it doesn't usually require as much heat. You just need to bring the pipe to a softened state, not to a completely plastic state like this. Okay. Let me move this aside, grab the pipe. You should be able to see me right here. I use the floorboards for orientation to get it straight, and I use the flattening jig itself to help me straighten it out. Usually if you roll it around, you'll find that one orientation is naturally just a little bit straighter than others. I like to put my weight on it approximately at the 1/3 and 2/3 mark. Since I'm not overly concerned with this bow being too light, I'm gonna just go ahead and spread my weight evenly. If I want it to be heavier, I will lean almost entirely, or depending on how much you want it to be heavier, on the right leg. If I want it to be lighter, lean more on the left leg. That's about it. Typically I'll just wait for a minute or so. On the floorboards it cools less quickly than it would in the garage when you're working on concrete. One other thing to remember is that not only do you have to wait longer while you're inside like this, but you can also do some cool stuff. Since it's still pretty warm, even a minute later, it might not be fully softened, but you're able to do some pretty cool stuff like bend it into a recurve shape if you want to. It's a really good time to do it because it's evenly heated, and getting that even heat without ruining the degree of taper is difficult later on. So this is a very nice time to do it. You don't want to do it so early, however, that you cause the bow to come to full round or lose too much of its taper. In this case, it's not too big of a deal because it is nearly full round. Okay. So let's just do a quick check and see. Yeah, great. Okay, so now see what I mean. Here it is. This will be the this will be the back of the bow, the belly. So I want the limbs to curve. So you see how it's nice and hot. I can do some of that nice delicate recurving right now, and it'll come out just fine. This is in addition to the reflexing and deflexing that I'm going to do later. So now just make sure it's straight. You can adjust it, tweak it, bend it on the ground, sight down the bow to make sure that it's straight. But check that out. Isn't that nice? So it will be reflexed at the handle, then it will be deflexed about here. But now you already have this gentle recurve. It looks really good, I think, and that's a great place to start. So that's the upper limb. Now we're going to work on the lower limb. Do the exact same thing. Okay? Since I turned the heat up a little bit and this limb is shorter, this will also go a little quicker. I did not, but you can and feel free to run this under cool water. That's not going to cause the PVC to become brittle, or at least it should not. At least in normal PVC that hasn't been overheated. The PVC doesn't fully actually melt until it's substantially hotter than this, I believe. If you haven't seen it already, and you're interested in learning more about PVC, I have a quick reference guide which is useful for archery in general, wood bows as well as fiberglass as well as PVC bows, incorporating lots of information and data, specific material information about things like PVC, melting points, mechanical and physical properties, all sorts of useful stuff. If you just want to geek out on it, go ahead, it's really fun. At least it was for me, and I'm improving all the time with information that I'm getting from all over the place. So check out the blog, that's goldenhordebows.blogspot.com. Or I'm always posting the updates to the PVC archery and crafting community on YouTube. You can join us there, and it's a blast. We're having a good time. People are always coming up with really cool projects. Well, such as this, the wood Scythian. That was actually demoed first there. So let's see, how are we doing? The same thing. Typically the outer third softens the slowest. And I'm sure that's just due to a minor defect in the way that I'm heating the limb. Okay, that's pretty good. So we move this aside once more. Go back down to the floor. Align it. And flatten it. Find that marker. Unfortunately, the marker was not centered. It wasn't on both sides. The lower limb should be a little bit stiffer than the upper limb because it's going to be under more stress. Being shorter, it'll have to bend more. Okay, we might have to laterally correct this limb later. That's okay. It might be a little curved, in other words. No big deal. So I'm going to put a little bit more force on it on my right leg. I'm also trying to correct the straightness by twisting the other limb. The earlier you can catch some of these problems and make the bow nice and even and straight, the more satisfied you're going to be in the long run. Ultimately, you're going to need to correct those deficiencies sooner or later, and sooner is usually easier. Definitely recommend doing that early on in the build process, because once your bow is fully shaped, your nocks are cut, yeah, you can correct everything, but it will take you longer. The more curves you have, the more chances you have to input errors, and the more difficult it's going to be to remove those errors. So catch them early, and fix them early, and I think you'll be very satisfied with the results. Okay, I am shifting my weight a little bit more towards the handle now. Basically, just look here. You can look at it from the side, look at it from the top, and you can tell how much you're tapering it. It's not as precise as it would be to use the jig the way it was meant to be used, but I find it works just fine. Particularly the more experience you have, you'd be surprised how efficient the human eye can be. Okay, so now I can see it's curved just a little bit. Take it on either side of those curves, and you can pull the curves out. There you go. Now that's pretty darn straight. Not 100%, but that's really close. That's good. Just so it doesn't puff up anymore, look like it was gonna just a tiny bit. And now, again, let's recurve it. Try not to focus too much on the inner portion of the bow. That's where it's going to be hottest and easiest to warp anyway, so no big deal. Now focus your energies on the outer sections, which cool off a little quicker. And anyway, the inner portion is going to be reflexed, deflexed anyhow. So, okay, now again, sighting down the bow, looking to see how straight it is. It's pretty good. There's a little bit of a twist that I can correct at the handle. It's pretty darn good. Not perfect. Pretty good. And the overall amount of reflex is actually even for both limbs, just a tiny bit more on the shorter limb than this one. I check that by taking a flat surface and I put both ends on the surface, and then I just look to see that the handle is horizontal. And that's a good check. So right now that's pretty darn fine. Our next step is going to be reflexing the handle and then putting in the decurves, or the deflexes.